the North Sea, 15th century. Imagine a cold so deep it ignores wool and cuts straight through to the bone. For years, Muggle sailors whispered legends about this specific grid on the map. They said compasses would spin aimlessly, that the fog tasted distinctly of iron, and that ships entering this sector didn't sink. They simply dissolved into the gray mist. None of them knew they weren't sailing into a storm. They were sailing into a mouth. At the center of this anomaly stood an island that officially did not exist. Not on any Muggle map, not in any wizarding registry. A blank space. A hole in reality. But the island was there. And it was not uninhabited. Inside a labyrinth of wet stone, a single man was conducting experiments that made even the darkest magic look merciful. Today, we know this place as the most secure prison in the wizarding world. But the truth is, Azkaban was never built to hold prisoners. Originally, it was designed to bait them. In the history of magic, villains usually want something grand. Power, immortality, blood purity. Grindelwald wanted to reshape the world. Voldemort wanted to rule it. But Ekrizdis? Ekrizdis just wanted silence. He was a wizard of unknown nationality and terrifying power, but instead of building an empire, he built himself a playground in the middle of the ocean. Using complex concealment charms, he wiped the island from the world's vision. To Muggles and wizards alike, it was just a stretch of open sea. But for sailors blown off course, it was the end. Ekrizdis lured Muggle ships onto the rocks, not for gold, not for slaves. The crews of these ships became disposable material in his experiments with the darkest arts. We don't know the details of what exactly happened within those fortress walls. Ekrizdis left no diaries. He left no memoirs. Only walls saturated with suffering so deep that the very magic of the location shifted. For decades, he practiced torture that went beyond physical pain, shattering the very psyche of his victims. He was alone, insane, and completely untouchable in his invisible castle. But even the most powerful dark wizards are mortal. Ekrizdis died alone, and with his final breath, the concealment charms that had hidden the island for centuries began to fade. When the protective barriers fell, the Ministry of Magic suddenly detected an unidentified object on their radars, an island that shouldn't be there. Naturally, an investigative team was dispatched. Officials expected to find a smuggler's hideout or an abandoned lab. Those who came back changed. They refused to speak about what they saw inside the fortress. Reports mentioned an unbearable cold and a smell that not even the salty sea wind could mask, the scent of deep, stagnant despair. But the scariest part wasn't finding Ekrizdis' body or his torture devices. The scariest part was the island's ecosystem. The fortress was crawling with creatures that are usually solitary. Dementors. And here is the key detail many fans miss. The Dementors were not brought to the island by the Ministry. They were already living there. They bred in the darkness of Ekrizdis' corridors like mold in a damp basement. Years of torturing Muggles created the perfect feeding ground, a buffet of agony that attracted these parasites in unthinkable numbers. The island wasn't just inhabited by them, it was infested. Inside the halls of power, panic ensued. A hardline faction insisted on the immediate destruction of Azkaban, raze the fortress to the ground, sink the island into the sea. It seemed like the logical step, but experts on dark entities laid their cards on the table and explained the horrifying reality. Dementors are nearly impossible to destroy physically. They aren't alive in the traditional sense, like you can't kill them with an Avada Kedavra or blow them up. But worse than that, they have instincts. If you destroy their habitat, this swarm won't vanish. Deprived of their nest, thousands of starving Dementors would flood towards the nearest food source. And their food is human emotion. Imagine a wave of depression and cold washing over villages, cities, schools. It would be a magical apocalypse. The Ministry was held hostage. Azkaban wasn't just a building, it was a container for radioactive waste that was already leaking. The fortress walls were so saturated with Ekrizdis' dark magic that they acted as a sedative, keeping the dementors in a trance-like state. Breaking the walls meant releasing the swarm. The situation seemed hopeless, until a man named Damocles Roll became Minister for Magic, and he had an idea that was as brilliant as it was monstrous. Damocles Roll was an authoritarian leader with a hard stance against Muggles. He looked at Azkaban and saw not a problem, but an opportunity. He scrapped plans for building new prisons on the mainland and proposed using Ekrizdis' island. His logic was terrifyingly pragmatic. Why spend gold on walls, bars, and salaries for wizard guards? The island already has the perfect wardens. They don't need payment, they don't sleep, they cannot be bribed, and most importantly, if we regularly supply them with prisoners, they will stay on the island. It wasn't an act of justice. It was a feeding contract. The Ministry of Magic effectively made a deal with the parasites. We give you a steady stream of fresh souls. Criminals, outcasts, dark wizards, and you, in return, do not touch the peaceful population of Britain. The prisoners of Azkaban became more than just inmates serving time. They became fuel, living biomass thrown into the furnace to keep the monsters fed and content. The system worked flawlessly. No one escaped, because fugitives had no will to live left. The Dementors got their feast. The Ministry got a reputation for the most secure prison in the world. Everyone won, except for those who were sent inside. For nearly 300 years, this bloody symbiosis was considered the perfect solution. The wizarding world slept soundly, knowing that evil was locked away on a distant island. But they forgot that monsters don't know loyalty. They only know hunger. And eventually, the food stopped being enough.